We've discussed how common sitting is and how we define sitting. I've shown the mortality risk from frequently sitting for longer than 30 minutes. We've looked at the mechanism whereby sitting causes its harm. So what can be done about it? We're in a sedentary culture, an office culture. Is it not inevitable for us to be sitting more? Let's take a closer look at some recommendations. I'll start by saying it's not at all inevitable that we continue to sit as much as we do. You can make a change. I've made this recommendation to thousands of patients, and they've been able to make the change, and so can you. First of all, I'll start by saying that I work in San Francisco. I see patients in San Francisco. Nobody stands. Everybody is sitting. And I recommend a standing desk. Everybody has a standing desk. So having a standing desk is only one part of the solution, but it is an essential first part. So my recommendation is to get a standing desk. The idea is you want the default in your workplace to be standing, even if that workplace is at home. But owning a standing desk is not enough. And here we come to this concept of nudge or choice architecture. What matters is what your default is. If you hear this recommendation and are convinced you should be standing, and you go out and buy a standing desk and then go back to your desk where you're sitting and set up that standing desk and look at it and say, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And you continue to work at your sitting desk, and next week goes by and you've stood once or twice and you say, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And now you stood once, and then next weeks go by and you said, yeah, that's what I should have been doing. And it just becomes something to hang your coat when you come home from work, or otherwise use as a piece of extraneous furniture, but certainly not stand. And the problem was you had the resolution, you had the willpower to buy it, but you relied on willpower and resolution to actually make the habit, and that's not going to be effective. Rather than continuing to sit and depending on an effort of will to stand, what you want to do is create an environment where you don't have to think about the study on sitting or this lesson. You're automatically standing without thinking. That's how I've arranged my home and my office. In my home, my dining table is a standing desk, so it is in the up position. If I want to eat, I actually have to lower my standing desk. So it is, when I work in my kitchen, I am defaulting to standing. The effortful choice is sitting. Same is true in my bedroom. I don't have a chair. I have a pedestal thing in my bedroom, and it's like manually you have to unscrew these knobs to get into sitting. So I don't even have a chair to sit on. So the point is that I haven't even figured out how I would sit in my bedroom. You want that to be the case in your environment where automatically you're standing, and it would take effort and ingenuity to figure out how to sit. At work, I don't come in every day and say I need to stand. I just have my laptop from the day before on my standing desk in the upright position. So I'm not thinking about a study on standing. I'm thinking about what I have to do that day. Standing was in the background. It was a decision I made by how I'd structured my environment. So in addition to buying a standing desk, I recommend having a overall living environment that defaults to standing. There are some other tips I've gathered from patients and from my own experience over the year that can help in situations where you just have to be sitting longer than 30 minutes. One would be a lot of people will drive to work. If you have the option of taking public transportation, great thing you can do is stand in the train car or stand on the bus. If you are flying a lot, getting an aisle seat and just walking down the aisle for just a minute after 30 minutes of sitting is a great idea. Standing during meetings is increasingly considered socially acceptable, and I encourage you to try it out at your next meeting if you find yourself in meetings where you have to be sitting. And remember, you don't have to leave the meeting. You can just stand right where your chair is and stretch your legs, or you could go off out to get a drink of water, and that would be enough standing to break up that interval of sitting. We've talked about a definition of standing, how common standing is, the evidence for the harm. We've talked about a definition of sitting, how often people, we've talked about a definition of sitting and the recommendation to limit total, and the recommendation to limit bouts of sitting to not more than 30 minutes at a time. I've shown you the evidence where you can see a mortality risk for often sitting for longer than 30 minutes. I've described the mechanism whereby we understand the harm from sitting occurs. I've provided you with tips for limiting the total duration of sitting throughout the day, as well as limiting the bouts of sitting to not more than 30 minutes at a time. Let's turn to some frequently asked questions. First question, if I go to the gym regularly, doesn't this cancel out sitting at my desk all day? Unfortunately, not. The physical activity recommendations, unfortunately not. The physical activity recommendations in Health Score, 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic exercise or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic exercise per week, and 2 sessions of strength training are vital, but they are not going to eliminate the risk from exceeding 30 minutes of sitting or exceeding 8 hours total of sitting. So it is very important for you to do aerobic exercise and strength training, but it is now appreciated that it's equally important what you do during the times you're not exercising. And standing should be your default. Next question, is lying down okay? I love this question because people are like, boy, I really see the truth in what you're saying. I really shouldn't be sitting so much, but standing hurts. And can't I just lie down? So the answer is, it's not that sitting itself is bad. It's that not using your peripheral muscles, your leg muscles, is bad. And lying down would also not use your peripheral muscles. So it would have the same harm as sitting. So you can't just lie down. I mean, unless you're sleeping. And finally, next question is, I call this the jack-in-the-box approach. Can't I just set an alarm to go off every 30 minutes? This is a very common response. People would like to kind of limit how much standing they have to do. So if they want to kind of meet this recommendation with as little standing as possible. So the question is, can I set an alarm on my watch? When it goes off every 30 minutes, stand for a minute, sit back down. There are 2 problems with this strategy. One is that you still need your total duration of sitting for the day to be less than 8 hours. So if you're only getting up for 1 minute stand breaks every 30 minutes, you're probably going to accumulate more than 8 hours of sitting for the day. The other problem is just sustainability. It sounds like a great idea to get buzzed every 30 minutes on your watch to be told to stand, but how long do you imagine tolerating that buzzing going off on your watch? Do you think that in 5 years from now, you're going to still want to be popping up out of your chair every 30 minutes you feel that buzz, or are you going to get numb to it and just turn it off? I think it's a better approach to default to standing, not constantly be reminded and to exert an act of will to get up and stand, but to have it be your default. Question number 4. I stand up whenever my iWatch tells me. Is that enough? Unfortunately, iWatch notifications to stand occur every 50 minutes to make sure you stand every hour, and I haven't been able to figure out how to adjust the interval of when you get that alarm going off. So if you're getting the alarm from the iWatch, it's been 50 minutes, 50, that you've been sitting, and that's too long. You've already exceeded the 30-minute threshold. And a final question I get, which I didn't write here, is, but it hurts to stand. So a lot of people will complain of leg pain, back pain, and so they find it a difficulty standing. It's tiresome. What I found is initially that was the case. I wasn't used to standing, and when I made it my default, it was something I was conscious of, I was aware of. And another thing that people say is that when they're in their deep focus mode, they want to be sitting because they find it distracting to stand. So what's interesting, first of all, is that this is a transient phenomenon. It's only going to be temporary, where you're struggling to stand, where you feel the cramping in your muscles, where you feel the cramping in your back. It's because you've been sitting all these years that your body's not used to standing, that your core is weaker, your leg muscles are weaker. With prolonged standing, however, your leg muscle strengthens, your core strengthens. You're able to accommodate standing without any pain and difficulty. And the good news is that low back pain is improved with prolonged standing. Sitting puts all of the strain of the weight of the upper body onto your back. Standing allows you to distribute the weight of your upper body to your lower legs as well as your back and your core. So standing causes less back strain. And finally, the point about being able to focus when you sit. Interestingly, studies have shown that performing cognitive tests, people do better when they're standing compared to when they're sitting, and even better when they're on a treadmill desk, for example, than when they're standing. But there's strong evidence that cognitive function is better when you're standing. It's just when you start doing it first, it's something you're conscious of, and that can be distracting. But once it becomes your default and your strength improves accordingly, and you're not thinking about the fact that you're standing, your circulation to your brain improves, and you're able to think better on your feet, literally. In this lesson, we've discussed the recommendation to limit sitting to not more than 30 minutes at a time. We talked about what defines sitting and how common it is in the general population. I showed you evidence that it will reduce risk of premature death if you avoid frequently sitting for longer than 30 minutes. We described the mechanism whereby sitting causes its harm. I provided tips for how to limit your sitting, both with a standing desk and by nudge choice architecture to make standing the default. And finally, I answered some frequently asked questions. I hope this video has been helpful. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.